Hey guys, welcome to the Level 1 First Aid Workshop. Today we're going to talk about the type of training we hope and expect Level 1 instructors to get before they start teaching or guiding mountain biking. The first thing to look at is the type of first aid course. So, lots of different first aid courses out there available to you, whether it's sort of an urban, St. John's Ambulance, something like that kind of first aid course, or more of a remote wilderness or outdoor first aid course. So that's the first thing to look at when you're researching first aid courses for the mountain bike industry. We're really trying to steer you guys towards those outdoor or wilderness first aid style courses. And the reason for that is pretty simple. It's more relevant to the job. First aid inside a building in a town is very different to first aid in a forest when it's raining. In an urban environment, we have a lot of resources available to us or are quite close to us. In an outdoor or wilderness environment, those resources aren't available, and we essentially have to deal with a first aid scenario with what's in our bag. So that's key. First thing to look for is a wilderness first aid course, and the next thing to look for is the time or the length of course. There's a lot of courses out there that are sort of 16 hours long, 20 hours long. What we recommend as a minimum for level 1 is a 40-hour or 4-day wilderness first aid course. And the reason for that is quite simple. There's a lot more time spent practicing scenarios, and actually the practical component of the course is much longer, so you get a good amount of time practicing splinting or soft tissue injuries or managing spinal injuries and all those kind of things that ultimately you need to know when you're out there on the trail if you have an incident with a student. So Ross is with me here. Ross coaches full-time kids, some high-level riders. These kids will ride anything in Whistler Valley, including the double blacks. And so his job really involves coaching kids weekly throughout the summer at a very high level, and obviously the consequence and risk of that is significant. So Ross, what's one of the main things that you take away from the first aid trainings you've done, and how does that impact your job as a coach?
I suppose the main thing is just having some training as to how to go through the process of if an accident does happen. Just giving you some tools to work with, just to try and help stabilize a patient, potentially know the steps to go and get help as well. But just going through the scenarios, it really just kind of makes you aware of how challenging it can be, particularly if someone has, say, a broken limb, how difficult it is to actually evacuate them from the type of terrain we're out in mountain biking. So it really sort of elevates that awareness that trying to manage the risk is really the most important thing, and just trying to avoid those injuries from happening.
Yeah, I think that's a key takeaway that I got from the courses is when you do those practice scenarios and you're trying to carry a patient or you're trying to splint a patient and it's raining, it's so difficult. It's really difficult. It's a tough time. Everyone on the course kind of gets stressed, and it's a fake scenario. So imagine what it would be like if it was a real scenario. And for me as a coach, that really impacts my decision making and my risk assessment. You know, when you see how those scenarios are so difficult to deal with, it definitely makes you improve your risk management when you're actually out there teaching real clients. Cool. So we'll take a look at my first aid kit here. Similar to the mechanics and toolkit workshop, we're not showing you a first aid kit that you have to carry all the time. This is just an example based on where I'm teaching and what programs I'm running. And again, if I change those programs, if we go further afield, more advanced terrain, the risks increase, the exposure increases, we're going to add things to the first aid kit. Okay, so number 1 tool, this guy, your phone. So making sure you're operating in an area with cell coverage, and if you don't have cell coverage, you have some kind of communication device, sat-nav, phone, radio, whatever it is. So tool number 1 is communication. So if anything does happen, you can contact 911. The other thing I like to do on my phone is I have a couple of first aid apps. They're fantastic for recording details or notes. And the other reason I really like them is some of the first aid apps have some great reminders or refreshers, some bullet points. So you're out there, you're dealing with a scenario, you're trying to remember how to put someone in a sling or how to splint a leg or something like that. There's some great pictures and bullet points to help you. So, number one, communication device, and maybe a couple of first aid apps as well to help you record information. That's key, making sure your phone's charged every day before you go to work. Alrighty, moving on. I'm going to go through the first aid kit, but also some other things that help manage risk through the day. I always carry a spare set of gloves. I can always pass them to a student if they get cold or wet hands, or for myself. So always have a spare pair of gloves in my bag. If it's rainy and cold, maybe 2 spare pairs of gloves. Got some coaching cones here. Move those out the way. We're just going to open this guy up. So the first thing you see is first aid kit at the top. If I had food or anything else in here, I'd still keep this at the top. Why? Quick and easy to access. And you'll notice that I like to put it in a big sort of thick Ziploc bag. It saves space, it saves weight, and more importantly, it keeps everything watertight. Cool. Do you put yours in a Ziploc bag or you carry it in a...
I have a kit that has its own little waterproof setup.
Cool. Awesome. Sweet. So, again, very easy to access, some rubber gloves. I got lots of rubber gloves inside my rubber gloves. I'll use a rubber glove to hold my rubber gloves. First thing you're going to need to put on for first aid. And then this is largely my soft tissue injury kit. Lots of different band-aids for all the sort of small scrapes and cuts. And then I like to just organize everything with my rubber bands so it's neat and organized, so when we're dealing with things out on the trail, we don't have things flying everywhere. So lots of non-stick gauze pads and sterile pads here, and compression pads for the bigger bleeds or the bigger cuts. And then I have kind of a patch of, really this is just larger band-aids and one sealed triangular bandage. And then here I have some alcohol wipes and some steri strips. So that's sort of my soft tissue injury kit. And then along with that, we have some tweezers, some nail clippers, and some triple antibiotic ointment for use on some of those dirtier cuts and scrapes. So fairly straightforward stuff there, fairly generic, nothing too flashy. I always take my waterproof. Russ, can you tell these guys why we always pack the waterproof even on sunny, hot days like today?
Well, if someone gets injured and they're going to be immobile for a large number of time, maybe they haven't brought their own waterproof, then it's a great way for helping them not get too cold. Because often, maybe when someone gets an injury, the actual injury itself doesn't present itself as being the most significant danger to them, and actually something like hypothermia could actually be the more severe thing.
Absolutely, yeah, and it can be surprising how even on a sunny day like today, if you lie down in the shady forest with the damp ground, how quick it is for that rider or that patient to get cold. So I always have some kind of insulating layer. If it's a colder day, I always like to just stash a beanie in there for the same reason. I can also use it in other first aid scenarios. Got a sling or a dislocated shoulder. Sometimes putting this under the armpit and then into the sling can help take some pressure off the shoulder. So a lot of the time when you're looking to pack your coach or your guide kit, you're looking for things that can be used in different ways. Okay, what else do we have? Got my scissors. These are proper quality stainless steel scissors that I can use to cut through clothing or cut laces off or cut helmet straps off. So if someone has an injury and we need to remove the clothing to get to the skin, we can cut this instead of taking their clothes off, which again keeps them warmer and safe from the elements. So that's an essential piece of kit. Some good quality scissors that will cut through clothing. Got the shock pump. Shock pumps at a push can kind of be used as part of a splinting tool. They're not ideal, but again, just being creative and thinking of ways that you can use your kit in a first aid scenario. Tell us about the SAM splint, Ross. Why do we always carry these guys?
They're pretty versatile. Obviously, you can kind of mold them a little bit into creating a little bit of a sling, and at a push, you can use it as a little bit of a makeshift neck brace. And yeah, like Paul's doing right now, you can just kind of mold it to help, an arm brace there, or even if you have two of them, potentially you can effectively immobilize the ankle joint for, say, a broken ankle.
Yeah. These SAM splints, if you haven't seen them before, it's just aluminium wrapped in foam. They're not too expensive, they're very lightweight, and they're moldable, so very easy to carry. No excuse really to not have one. I carry water on my bike, like so. I also carry water on my back. So the idea is that when you're out there, it's not just your first aid kit, it's the other things that can make a difference. So enough water for you and maybe a little extra water for the student. I like to carry my little first aid reminder cheat sheet just tucked into my bladder sleeve there, so I can pull that out if I need any reminders. Cool. And then I've got my inner tube here. That can be used for different slings and scenarios. I've seen people walking out of trails with broken collarbones, and they've used the inner tube as a sort of makeshift sling. Not ideal, but again, something to consider. Sweet, so that's pretty minimal first aid kit, and that's about as low as we're going to go. This first aid kit is primarily for me. I'm coaching this weekend in a front country environment. The trails are very close to the medical clinic. The trails are green and blue, and it's a pretty low-end riding group. So those things are all taken into account when I tailor my first aid kit. If we want to bump things up, we can always carry things in addition to this sort of basic first aid kit that we have here. And then just lastly, there's a few things that I have in here that we add. I always like lots of triangular bandages. Splinting, mountain biking, so collarbone injuries are definitely a potential. So it's good to have more than one triangular bandage, so that's 3. Then I have a crate bandage for those kind of sprains, ankle sprain or knee sprain. And then I really like this stuff. I can't remember the exact name of it now, but basically a bandage that sticks to itself. So it's fantastic for being outside in the wet and the cold. Wrap that round, a nice compression bandage, and it stays where you put it. That's a great one. And then lastly, a couple more things in here. Just the medical tape. Again, soft tissue injury. That's going to help you there. And then I always just have 1 or 2 empty Ziploc bags. So when you're finished treating those soft tissue injuries or whatever it might be, you've got somewhere to put the rubber gloves and the materials that you use. Cool. Now, one of the last things to talk about, obviously, is with COVID, we need to make sure that we have the necessary procedures in place. PMBIA has those procedures on its website, but it's something to consider too, making sure you have the necessary face masks and those elements in your first aid kit, so that if you are near a patient, you're near someone who's not part of your close bubble, you're making sure you're putting the rubber gloves on, the face mask on, before you go close to that patient and help them out. Cool. And lastly, I'm just going to show you a couple of these. Sometimes when you're adding up the toolkits, you're adding up your first aid kit, it can get quite a lot of weight on your bag, and this is just a suggestion. The companies make some more and more of these kind of bike packing bags now, where we can put bags on the handlebars or on the seat, and it helps take some of that weight off your back. And doesn't really negatively impact the ride. I've done a little bit of riding with this kind of equipment on my bike, and I was really impressed of how little it actually affected the ride of the bike, but how nice it was to have a lighter bag. So that's something as a coach or as a guide to consider when you're building up your toolkits and your first aid kits, if that might make you more comfortable day in, day out. But that's it for now with the first aid kit. So level 1 instructors, we're looking for an outdoor or wilderness first aid cert. We're looking for that cert to be at least 40 hours long. I myself, I'm an 80-hour wilderness first responder. Russ, you're a 40-hour wilderness first responder. And can you tell us something we do in our coaching company every year on top of that sort of basic first aid training? What do we do at ZEP?
Yeah, probably every maybe 2 months we organize a staff training day, and we actually get someone from search and rescue to come in and help facilitate a scenario that we have to try and just get practice with using our training. And I can't speak highly enough about doing that. It's one of those tricky things when we're a mountain bike instructor. We're helping people get better on their bikes, and sometimes accidents happen, but we don't want them to happen, and you can't get good with your first aid without any practice. So the only safe way of getting practice with the first aid is through these scenarios.
Yeah, and it's like anything. If you don't use it, you lose it, and if you're a good coach, you shouldn't be using it. So I think that's a great tip. Is for sure get your first aid cert, but also try and find some places, some situations where you can get that ongoing additional training. Because as much as the PMBIA level 1 is all about teaching safely and guiding safely, the teaching and the guiding is one aspect of being a professional instructor. And if you want to go out there and teach mountain biking, it's very important you have that first aid training in your tool belt as well. So before you come to your level 1, have a think about that. You don't necessarily need your 40-hour first aid to take the level 1. We just highly recommend that before you start teaching, you have that first aid training in place. That's it for now. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next workshop.